Visit us at Eduvvo. Thank you for calling Eduvvo.
CSS can be added to a page several different ways, each with its own advantages or disadvantages. So let's review 3 methods we can use to apply CSS to our page. Throughout our deep dive, don't worry if your syntax color doesn't exactly match mine. Code editors have different themes for syntax highlighting. So as long as your syntax is correct and matches mine, everything should work just fine. So in our file setup, we have a simple HTML file containing heading elements, paragraphs, and an unordered list here at the bottom. In the browser, we can see that no author styles have been applied just yet. We're currently seeing the default styles applied by the Chrome browser, which applies margins to the body, headings, paragraphs, and the unordered list. So let's go ahead and create our own custom author styles for this page. So there are 3 methods we can use to add CSS to a page. The first method is with inline styles. The second method is with internal styles. And the third method is with an external style sheet. So first up, inline styles mix content with presentation because we apply the CSS directly to the HTML elements. To add an inline style, we need to use the style attribute inside the HTML element we want to style. So for example, if we add the style attribute inside the body tag and inside the quotation marks, I'll go ahead and add the background color property and a value of light blue. So I will go ahead and save this page and take a look at it in the browser. And when we refresh, we can see how that inline style made the background color of our page a light shade of blue. Back in our HTML file, if we add another style attribute, this time we'll go ahead and add it to the first paragraph, and we will add a font weight property and the value bold. So I'll save this and refresh the browser, and we can see how the text inside the very first paragraph is now bold. So we can apply just about any CSS property using the inline style method. Inline styles are at the lowest level possible of the cascade. So that means they will override any styles declared in external or internal style sheets. Inline styles are not really considered good practice and should be used sparingly because if we need to make any styling changes, it means that we need to go directly into the markup. So we're not really separating content from presentation, which makes maintenance difficult and impractical. However, inline styles might be good for creating quick HTML and CSS mockups and prototypes, or for temporary styles not meant to be shared with other elements on the page. So next, let's take a look at how to add internal styles. Internal styles are embedded in the head section of the document and are defined using the style tag. With this method, we can write all of our CSS within the head section of the HTML document. So inside of our head element, we'll go ahead and add the style tag. And inside of the style tag, we will select the heading 1 on the page by typing H1 and a set of curly braces. Inside of the H1 rule, I will go ahead and add the color property, where I will give it the value white, followed by the background color property, where I will give it a value of red. Now, don't worry about these properties and values just yet. We'll cover most CSS properties and their values throughout this deep dive. For now, just know that these styles will make the text color of our heading 1 white and the background color a light shade of red. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this HTML file and take a look at it in the browser. When we refresh it, there we see the new color and background styles applied to our heading 1. This internal style sheet method might be useful if we're creating a small-scale one-page site, a coming soon landing page, or if it's for temporary use while, for example, testing a new feature or a small iteration. Now, the downside to using this method on a larger website is that because the styles are on the same page, they are required to be downloaded each time the page is loaded by the browser. It also means that we may need to duplicate a lot of the same styles across multiple pages. So next up, with an external style sheet, we can change the look of an entire site or app with just one file. So first, we'll need to create a new CSS file, which is where we'll add our new styles. So in our Sublime text editor, I will go ahead and add a new file, and I will name it style.css. I'll go ahead and save this new file inside of our directory named CSS, and I'll hit save. Now, the CSS extension we just used is what tells the browser that the file we've created is a style sheet. So make sure that you add that .css extension to every CSS file you create. So in our head section, right below the title tag, we can add that link tag. Now, at the very least, we'll need to add 2 attributes to this link tag in order for our CSS file to link correctly. So first, the rel attribute specifies the relationship between the current HTML document and the file we want to link to. So here, because it's a style sheet, the value needs to be style sheet. So next, the href attribute is what points to the location of the file. So in our href value, we will go ahead and add that path to the new CSS file we've just created. So we know that the file is saved in a directory named CSS, and we named it style.css. So I'll go ahead and save this, and I will go into the new CSS file we created earlier. So in this new CSS file, I'll go ahead and add a few rules that will select the heading 2 element on the page and the unordered list. So up in our h2 rule, I will go ahead and give it a color property and the value steel blue. I will also add some bottom padding of 10 pixels. And I will give it a border bottom property that is 2 pixels wide and is dotted. So below in our UL rule, we'll give it a color value of white and a background color of steel blue. Again, don't worry about understanding these properties and values just yet, as we'll go over all of the properties and values throughout this deep dive. So we'll go ahead and save this and take a look at it in the browser. When we refresh the browser, we now see how our new styles have affected the page. The advantage to using this method is flexibility. We keep our CSS rules in a file separate from our markup, so any changes or additions we need to make can be done in that one CSS file. Another advantage is that the style sheet is oftentimes cached by the browser, which saves on download time throughout the site or repeat visits, because the style sheet only needs to download one time. Now we can actually go into our HTML file and cut out this style block we created earlier, and we can add the H1 rule to our new style sheet. And as we can see, nothing really changes because the document is now referring to those styles we created in that new CSS file. Another method of using an external style sheet is with an @import rule, which can be used in linked or internal style sheet. Now, this method allows us to import CSS from other CSS files, so it shares some of the same advantages as linking a style sheet, such as browser caching and maintenance efficiency. So back in our head section, let's create a new style tag like we did earlier. So in the style tag, I will go ahead and type @import followed by a set of quotation marks and a semicolon. Now inside the quotation marks, we'll need to specify the path to the file we want to import. In the CSS directory of our project files, you should see a file named morestyles.css, which contains simple layout and color styles. So we'll go ahead and import this file so we can see how those styles get applied to the page once imported. So back in our HTML file, we'll go ahead and add the CSS directory followed by more styles.css. So when we save the HTML file and refresh the browser, now we see how the page has imported the styles from more styles.css. We see that the font sizes are bigger and that the page has more padding and margins. We can also import a style sheet from within a style sheet. So in our HTML file, let's go ahead and remove this @import statement. And we'll save the HTML file and we'll go into the style.css file and we will add that import statement to the top of the page. It's important to remember that this @import statement must precede all other CSS rules in a style sheet in order for it to work properly. So we have to keep it up top. So the style.css file is already in the CSS directory, so we don't need to include it in our path. We can actually keep it as more styles.css. So when we save this file and refresh it in the browser, notice how nothing has changed because we're still importing the same CSS file. This import method can make CSS more modular by splitting it into different files. So while the page might link to one style sheet, the style sheet itself can import other style sheets for, say, layout, colors, typography, and so forth. Now, the drawback to using the @import method is performance, as each import statement is also a new request to the server. Now that we're familiar with the 3 ways we can add CSS to a page, we're ready to select HTML elements and begin applying styles to them. Coming up next, we'll go over basic CSS selectors for styling elements.